Life has a cruel way of giving us truths when we least expect it. This is how, on my 50-year-old birthday, he appeared in my house with his next lover, as if it were the most natural guest in the world. It was no surprise, I already knew everything. But the pain was like a blinding light, from that Kaluga sun that doesn't warm with love but burns without mercy, revealing every scar, every lie. And it was precisely there, in those days before the party, that something in me awakened. Not a bitter woman, but a force I didn't even know existed. Every ray of sun that cut the clouds over Smolensk's hills seemed to whisper, "Now it's your turn, Tamara. Shine for you, not for anyone else." Who would say that the approach of the 50 would make me feel more alive than in every youth? My life has always been a predictable routine: supermarket lists, hasty dinners, walls that kept the weight of years of obligations. But suddenly that same 3-room apartment, witness with so many equal days, was filled with new energy. The walls, once seedlings, now breathed expectation. My hands, used to washing dishes and folding clothes, gained a new purpose, planning every detail of a birthday that would not just a celebration, but a statement. A celebration of the woman I became, with her battles, her victories, and even her wounds. And then they came, my children, Lena and Kirill, diving with me in this current preparations. Lena, with her bright eyes like stars, suggested, "Mother, and if we got all with alströmerias and golden ribbons? You love it. Imagine how it would be." Each gesture of her was a mirror of my own heart, that same enthusiasm that makes me tremble in the face of beautiful things, that same way to surrender to dreams without measuring efforts. Kirill, my serious boy, who hides the tenderness behind a practical mask, was already eyeing the computer. "Look, Mother, I found a porch house, just like the magazines. Perfect for the photos you wanted." His now firmer voice still carried the sweetness of a smile that illuminated the whole face. We spent hours leaning over catalogs, inspiration groups, discussing garlands, menus, musicians. How about a saxophonist? To give that climate. Each choice was made with such affection that it seemed that the party had already started right there, among cold tea and laughing cups. I saw everything so clearly: the transformed room, flowers everywhere, a sea of colors, carefully selected guests, those who were by my side in tears and laughs, who held me when the floor seemed to collapse and celebrated every little victory. And the dress. This was my best kept secret. Something unique, known only to me and the mirror. I ordered tissue samples, tried cuts, imagined how each line would highlight not only my body, but my essence. Because yes, to the 50, I deserved to feel a queen. And when he looked at me in the mirror, he saw a glow in the eyes that had long been erased. It wasn't just the thrill of the event, it was the rebirth of a flame I thought was extinct. A new wind was enough for her to burn again with an intensity that surprised me. Today, with a clarity that hurts, I understand what Tamara of the time, naive and full of hope, could not see. As I unfolded to turn our apartment into a cozy home, Oleg dilapidated our money into restaurants such as Tarnuki and Sirvania, places where he only took me in wedding birthdays, like crumbs of a banquet that was never mine. Gifts that I just dreamed of flipping through catalogs, travel to Sochi, rides on the Golden Route. For me, it was all beautiful photos on social networks. Each ruble spent on her was a steal of my dignity being stolen, an effort of mine being reduced to nothing. I remember that day as if it were today. The sun was hitting hard in the kitchen window while I organized the party's bills. The guest list grew, and with it, the costs. The heart squeezed, but the excitement was stronger. Oleg was in the living room, glazed on television with a bottle of beer in his hand, as if nothing is happening. I gathered all the courage that I was left to me, and with a thread of tenderness that still insisted on existing, I asked, "Oleg, it's 50 years old. Our birthday. Couldn't you share spending on me? It would be so important." He turned, and what I saw in his eyes froze my soul. There was no more affection, just a wall of indifference I had never noticed before. "Your answer came like a slap. I can't help you, Tamara." The words came out like spit. It hurt. But what came later gave me a crumb of hope. "But I'll give you a special gift," he said, and I, foolish, smile. I still clung to the straws, wanting to believe in the best. My silly heart jumped with childish joy. A ring? A trip for two, like in the old days? If only I knew that that gift would be the knife in the back. The days passed, and as I drowned in preparations, choosing the last flowers, confirming presents, he lived his lie. His lame excuses no longer glued, his absences shouted louder than any word. Until, one morning, by separating clothes to wash, I found the test. A sweet, vulgar, strange smell. It was not my perfume. It was not from our home. That fragrance, impregnated with his shirt, shouted a truth that I insisted on ignoring. The air became heavy, the eyes burned not of sadness, but of a sharp, sharp understanding. The heart squeezed as if an invisible hand crushed him. The betrayal was real. It was not a paranoia, it was not an invention of abandoned woman. It was a fact. Each lame excuse, every fleeing look, every suspicious exit now made sense, fitting like pieces of a macabre puzzle. That special gift gained a new, dark, cruel meaning. On the morning of my birthday, Kaluga's sun shone, but something oppressed my chest. I was wearing a mixture of joy and a feeling that didn't leave me alone. The happiness was there, but poisoned by the certainty that fate kept a revelation. The silent apartment did not bring peace, it was a tense silence, like before a storm. Every gesture, every detail of my preparation, the dress, the hair made in the corner hall, the makeup was made with the reverence of who knows that this moment was sacred. I didn't just want to be beautiful. I wanted to feel invincible. And there, in front of the mirror, I adjusted the last hair with hands that did not train, despite the whirlwind inside me. I smile, a smile that cost blood, but it was mine. Tamara, today you shine, I whispered to my reflection, and it wasn't a godly lie. Not for him. Never for him. It was for me, for the woman who survived the nights in clear questioning every sigh, every lame excuse, every strange perfume that packed her skin like a second skin. I didn't know that, in a matter of seconds, that apartment, my kingdom, my sanctuary, would become the stage of a grotesque spectacle that would mark me forever. The door did not open. She was broken into. Not by the wind, not for a late guest, but by Oleg, who burst into space like a poisoned blade, cutting the air with a violence that froze my blood. But it was not his presence that killed me. It was her. Inna. The lover. The shadow that had been crawling for the corners of my life for months, now hand in hand with my tormentor, in my home where I raised my children, where each laugh echoed on the walls as a blessing, where each scar of our past was buried under paint and memories. On the day of my jubilee, Theatrically, air ran away from my lungs. Time stopped. It was not a silence. It was a vacuum, a black hole that sucked all oxygen, all hope, all the normal facade I had built so carefully. Inna smiled. Those lips painted with the same lipstick that I found staining his handkerchief in the jacket pocket. That perfume, sweet and cheap, like an imitation of luxury, now emanating from it, infecting my space, my story, my life. My eyes, which a second before they shone with the expectation of the party, turned into two embers. Not of pain. Of fury. Such a pure, so primitive fury that I didn't even know it existed in me. Oleg stared at me with a cold. No remorse. No shame. Only that contempt he must have rehearsed in the mirror, like an actor preparing his grand final. And then he said, these words. Each syllable was a knife, sharp and accurate. Has your gift, Tamara, he said, with an irony he intended to be cruel, but sounded only pathetic. Get used to it. Frankly, that's what you deserve. The impact should have destroyed me. I should have fallen on my knees, shouted, ripped my hair like a soap opera heroine. After all, isn't that what the world expected from a betrayed woman, humiliated, crushed in the home, the day it should be yours? But something inside me refused to follow the script. My eyes remained dry. My column, erect. And then, I laughed. It was not a laugh of madness. It was not a disguised cry. It was the sound of a woman who, after decades swallowing frogs, finally spat poison. Such a sharp laugh that it must have left marks on the walls. Is that what you have, Oleg? My voice didn't train. It was steel. Do you think this shakes me? The laugh echoed through the room, filling each corner with such a dense energy that even Inna retreated, his trusted mask collapsing like wet plaster. Her smile disappeared, replaced by a panic that must have been delicious to see. Do you think you destroyed me? I advanced a step, and each word was a hammer. I knew everything. Each strange perfume in your coat. Each lame excuse of meeting until late. Each night when his eyes shone with something that was not love for me. I waited. Let you dig your own grave. I turned to Inna, now pale, my eyes wide like those of a trapped animal. And I laughed again, this time with almost sick pleasure. The irony was so thick that he could cut with a knife. He thought he was surprising me, but the only surprise was him, such a predictable man that even his betrayal was cliché. The laughter still hanging in the air when I heard halted steps in the hallway. Lena and Kirill. My children. They entered the room with the sparkle of the party in their eyes until they see that. The grotesque show that his father had set up. Their faces froze. Understanding has hit them as a lightning. And then the world truly collapsed. Lena was the first to react. Her body trembled with such an intense anger that it seemed that she was going to disintegrate. Did you bring her here? His scream was an earthquake, an accusation that not only hit Oleg, but burned Inna as acid. On Mom's day. In our house. My daughter's voice was a sawn knife, cutting each word with a pain that only a betrayed daughter can feel. Kirill, my son, usually so contained, distorted his face in such a deep disgust that he looked like he was going to vomit. You are nothing, father. A zero. The simple and brutal phrase stopped in the air like a sentence. It wasn't just anger. It was contempt. The kind of contempt that destroys a man, that reduces him to ashes before his own children. Oleg tried to say something. He opened his mouth, but the words died before born. What could he say? What excuse invent to justify that? Your children didn't want to hear. His eyes, the same eyes that once looked at him with admiration, now crushed him with a weight that no man supports. He, the great Oleg the untouchable, was naked. Not for the betrayal. By cowardice. Inna, who for seconds it seemed so safe, now it was just an embarrassed shadow. The flush disappeared from his face, replaced by sickly pallor. She must have imagined this scene in another way, perhaps laughing, with triumphs, with the feeling of having beaten. But there was no victory there. Only naked and raw reality. It was the intruder. The strange. The woman who, unknowingly, had become an accomplice of a crime against her family. Without a word, without a goodbye, she escaped through the door like a rat, leaving behind only the cheap smell of her perfumes, a trail of shame that mingled to the heavy air from the room. When the door knocked, a thick silence took over the apartment. Oleg, once so imposing, now seemed to wither, as if the contempt of his children had sucked all its essence. I took a deep breath. A long breath that expelled all the rot from that moment. My face was impassive. There were no tears. There was no weakness. Just a granite determination. I looked at Lena and Kirill, still shaking, my eyes fixed on me, seeking answers, strength, perhaps a sign that everything was lost. My voice, calm and firm, broke the silence. Come on. I reached out to them. There was no drama in my tone. There was no self-pity. Just the certainty that life would not stop there. The party is not over yet. They stared at me, astonished. Not for the scene they had witnessed, but for my reaction. By my strength. Because I had refused to be the broken woman, betrayed, crushed on the floor. I was a 50-year-old woman, and that night, more than ever, I was queen. Hours after the storm, I was exactly where I planned to be. Not as a survivor. Like a victorious. The living room. The living room was stunning. The alstromerias, the ones Lena had insisted on decorating with golden tapes, their favorite touch, radiated a light that even Oleg's shadow could turn off. The soft, cozy light involved every corner, like a velvet hug. Every detail, every petal of the alstromerias, every shake flame of the candles seemed to whisper in my ear, "You got it, Tamara. You're here." And I was. Not alone. Not as a shadow of what it was out. But surrounded by my pillars, Lena and Kirill, my children, my strength, my live shield. When we crossed that space together, the air vibrated with a wave of applause, a chorus of voices that not just greeted me, but celebrated. Real friends. Family that mattered. Those who, over the years, had proved with gestures, not with words, that were there to stay. They got up, and their faces. Their faces shone with smiles so genuine that Oleg's cynicism seemed suddenly a spot faded in a master frame. A sea of hugs involved me. Kisses on the face, hot words that warmed more than wine in the cups. Each touch was a balm, every handshake, an injection of pure courage. Galia, my neighbor, my soul sister, he hugged me with a strength that would almost take my breath and whispered, my lips brushing my ear, Tamara, you're stunning. More beautiful than ever. And I smiled. Not with the lips, but with a whole soul. You know, Galia, I feel beautiful. I feel free. That confession was worth more than all the gold rings Oleg had ever offered me, or that it will no longer offer. Then came the dances. As I danced. With Lena, who turned around me as if we were two loose butterflies in the same garden. With Kirill, whose proud smile was the mirror of my own rebirth. With cousins, friends, even with Moscow's aunt, the one who always knew how to make me laugh even to hurt my belly. Each step was a victory. Each spin, an act of silent rebellion. The song carried us, and I let me take it, light as never before, as if I had finally dropped a burden I didn't even know. That carried. There were no tears in my eyes. Just a new glow. That night was not about Oleg. It was not about betrayal. It was about me. About the woman who had refused to bend. About the phoenix that, without fuss, had resurfaced from the ashes with stronger wings. I looked around and saw, laughs filled the room, voices mingled with the sound of the saxophone, whose notes seemed written just for that moment. We were not just a meeting of people. We were a statement. We celebrated my 50 years, yes, but above all we celebrated freedom. The freedom to be who I was always, no excuses, without concessions. Without shrinking to fit the molds of others. Among the flashing lights of the garlands and the contagious rhythm of live music, something in me sang. It was not relief. It was triumph. Each gift, every glass of vodka erected to heaven, every word spoken between laughs were verses of a hymn, the hymn of Tamara who, against all bets, had chosen the joy instead of bitterness. My children looked at me with a pride that burned more than any fire. In Lena's eyes, he saw admiration for his mother who had not left. In Kirill's hug, I felt the strength of a man who, even injured, had chosen to be by my side. Mother, Lena muttered, squeezing my hand as if I feared I would disappear. You are the strongest woman I know. And Kirill, with that smile he had inherited from his father but who, thank God, used with a sweetness that Oleg never knew, pulled me close. That hug said everything. We're here. They were my port. My rock. And for them and for me I would stand up. The party extended until dawn. There was cake of those that only the Razbukov Kuza knows how to do it, karaoke outlined but full of soul, tears and laughs intertwined as wires of the same fabric. And, above all, the certainty that this was not an end. It was a beginning. Let's toast to life. To friendship. To the family we chose and, above all, to me. To the woman who, in the face of the most common cruelty, had opted for dignity. By the light. For freedom. Tamara de Kaluga was no longer a victim. It was a winner. And that night was the living proof of that. In the following days, the city seemed to wear colors that I had never noticed before. The air was lighter. The sun, more golden. Divorce, which I had imagined being a dragged and painful process, advanced at an almost ironic speed, as if even the Russian bureaucracy knew it was time to close that chapter. There were no dramas. There were no screams. Only papers signed with the same determination as the page of a bad book, eager for the next one. And Oleg. Oleg began to understand too late the weight of his choices. The man who had thought so cunning, so superior, now wandered for our old Thrika as a purposeless ghost. The house, once full of laughter and dishes being washed in a hurry, was now a mausoleum of his illusions. I moved. My children, those giant hearts, rented for me an apartment in the next building. Until we buy one for you, mother. To start from scratch, they said, with a seriousness that made me cry not in sadness, but of such a big love. Oleg, in turn, after Inna disappeared from her life as quickly as she had appeared, like a feverish dream that fades at dawn, began to revisit her achievements. And he discovered, with bitterness, that he had never loved Inna. Neither to her nor to anyone. What he sought was not passion, but the chill of betrayal, the adrenaline of the forbidden, the inflated ego of feeling desired, the illusion of being two men in one, the bored husband and mysterious lover. When the news was faded, when there was no more lies to weave or risk to run, Inna was just another shadow in her empty life. The scam fell. And what else was not the loneliness, but the fact that I had not given him the pleasure of seeing myself destroyed. There were no scenes. There were no public tears or threats. I did not beg. No. I began. My indifference, this calm silence before your attempt to humiliate me, was your most cruel defeat. He expected war. Found the emptiness. And the emptiness, my dear Oleg, is much more terrifying than any fury. My serenity disturbed him because there was no reaction to justify, no fight to distort the truth. He was the villain of this story. And your children? Ah, your children. Lena and Kirill did not break ties with him in a rage access. They did something much worse. They treated him with the polished coldness of strangers. No shouts. No doors knocking. Just distance. Congratulations messages for obligation. Cancelled meetings. A silence that spoke more than 1,000 words. The contempt in their eyes, the same one that I saw in the living room, became permanent. And that, yes, was his most painful loss. The disdain of his children was the mirror of his own disdain for us. But what he truly consumed was to see me move on. Without hatred. Without looking back. I flourished in silence, like a flower after the storm. I started attending dance classes at the Strela, that old dream that Oleg had always despised. Why waste time? I signed up for cooking courses at Dom Kulturi, improving recipes that now, I knew, were made to fill my soul, not that of an ungrateful husband. He went out with friends. Ria loudly. I traveled to St. Petersburg on weekends, as if life were a party I was finally invited to. My eyes. They shone in a way that never shone beside him. My energy was contagious, a force that sprang from inside, from a place to which he would never have access. It didn't look for him. I didn't ask for him. He gave no sign that his absence affected me, and that went crazy. He expected to find a skeletal, bitter Tamara, attached to the past, but came across a radiant woman who radiated peace and happiness. It is said that now he spends the nights with a bottle of brandy, turns series on the television, but fixes his look on the wall. Inna disappeared from social networks, no longer appears. His name turned taboo even in the conversations. Meanwhile, I really live, for the first time in years. And you? When was the last time you allowed yourself to be reborn? Life is not an essay. It's the piece. And the stage is waiting for you. See you soon.